107 Meridian FM.
Right, we're going to get jiggy with Will Smith, and straight after that, we'll be speaking to Phil Baker.
Welcome back. I'm going to be talking today with Phil Baker, who runs his own business, a chartered surveying and lettings agency specialising in commercial property sales and letting. And the name of your firm, Phil, is Park and Bailey Commercial. And there is an estate agency of that name, Park and Bailey Limited, but you are completely separate.
Yes, that's right.
Yes. And you run the business with your wife, and you have done for a number of years.
Yes, that's right.
So, can you tell us, how did your career begin?
Quite by accident, really. I wasn't intending to leave school, and I was intending to go on to college, actually, but a job was offered by an estate agent in Oxford, and I went along and got the job, and it went from there, really. I was with them for 10 years in Oxford, but that was residential sales, residential lettings, etc.
Yes.
So yes, that's how we started, and then after 10 years I came down to East Grinstead and joined a firm called Payne and Company. Probably a number of people will remember Payne and Company in East Grinstead, and I was there, I was taken on as a manager and then became a partner, and eventually I became senior partner. And then we merged with a firm called A.T. Underwood and Company in Crawley to form Underwood Payne. And in 2001, we sold the business to Park and Bailey Limited. And it was at that time that I set up my own business, Park and Bailey Commercial, in East Grinstead.
Okay, so your history really is tied up with property.
Yes, you could say that. Yes.
Yeah. Just thinking about the shops that there are now in the town and comparing what we have now when we walk down London Road or go up to the High Street, there seem to be lots more coffee shops and charity shops, and we have lost quite a few of the more specialist retailers like Currys, and also the individual greengrocers and butchers and the more expensive ladies' clothes shops, which I really do miss. Can you tell us why you think this is? Is it changes in shopping habits or high rents, or what could it be?
I don't think it's actually high rents. I think it's a change in our habits, really. More and more shopping is done online these days. So I think that you're finding like firms like Currys are sort of changing their outlook and trading in a different way. It is a shame in some ways that we've lost some of the names like Russell and Bromley, who were in the town for years. I think that's probably a change in the way we now shop. And yes, the coffee shops have grown quite considerably over the last few years. It seems to be the trend that we must well walk around with a cup of coffee. But I think you've lost some of the independent shops in the town. And yes, they've been replaced by coffee shops. But in general, I think East Grinstead fares quite well, really.
Yes, there certainly aren't many empty shops now, are there?
No, there isn't actually, and I was pleased to see the other day, I know it's a firm moving within the town, but Holland and Barrett, who had quite a small shop, have moved into what was the old curry shop in London Road, which I think is good. And I believe there's interest in one or two of the other empty shops in London Road, so that's good.
Well, definitely, because it's very depressing when you walk through a town and you see so many.
Oh yes, I agree with you there. But you do need a reason to come into the shop.
Of course.
I mean, you mentioned earlier sort of greengrocers and butchers and that sort of thing. Well, of course, with the advent of Waitrose and Sainsbury's, etc., people tend to do all their shopping in one place. So you have to some extent lost the sort of local trades in that sort of connection, really.
Yeah. I mean, kind of carrying that through. Sometimes those of us who've lived in the town for quite a few years, we see a new shop opening, and when you talk to other people locally, they say, "Oh, I don't think that will last very long. That, you know, there's no demand for whatever they're selling in the town," and they do usually close fairly quickly. And unfortunately, probably the retailer has debts afterwards as a result of an unsuccessful venture. Are there any local business organisations that do offer advice to aspiring retailers?
Well, yes, there are. Of course, there's the East Grinstead Business Association, and there's also the larger business group in Sussex. But you can also, there are certain accountants and that type of profession that will give you advice on setting up a business. I mean, you do need to go into it in some detail. You can't just go along and say, yes, well, I think what I've got in mind will do and it'll work well, because it often doesn't. You've got to work out what your potential income is going to be, and you've got to work out what your expenses are, like your business rates and your service costs and your rent, insurance. Obviously, you need insurance if you're running a business. So yes, you do actually have to go into it in some detail to make sure that what you're proposing will actually work. And if you've given it your best shot and then it still doesn't work, well, you have to say, I gave it a try. Yeah. And rather than not do it and say, I wish I'd done it at some point, at least you can say, well, I've given it a try and it didn't work. No. Yes. No.
Now, I know you're in your firm, you are letting properties on behalf of the landlord generally. But,
yeah, that's right.
So if a prospective, new retailer comes along, do you have to do what's called due diligence prior to putting forward, the agreement with the landlord to see whether the business should be viable? You take up references, etc.
Oh yes, I think I should first say that we, of course, do act for the owner or the landlord of the property. But yes, I mean, we do. If somebody comes along to us and asks about the property, they're first of all going to have a look, obviously, and then we will talk to them about what they've got in mind. It's in confidence between us and them because obviously they don't want to publicise it before they're ready. And we do go in and do actually ask them whether they have gone into it and they've looked at their rates and the other costs and what they expect their turnover to be, etc. And if they have done all that, and most people have, they've either taken advice, as I said earlier, from a business organisation or an accountant, then we will, obviously they'll look at the property maybe once, maybe twice, or even 3 times. And then we will talk to them. They'll probably make an offer to lease it. We will need to negotiate that, how long the lease is, whether there's a rent review in that lease, whether they want a rent-free period to help with the fitting out of the shop. All those sort of things are discussed. But then if we do finally agree terms, then of course it is subject to approval of references, where we will probably write to their bank, to their accountant if they have one, to any trade organisation, somebody who can speak to them. It can't be a relative because they'll obviously give them a glowing reference. Yes. So it's got to be somebody who knows what they're doing. But yes, we do, because there's no point in putting it all together and then finding it won't last 5 minutes really. So yes, we do go into it in some detail. Yes.
Yeah. And just thinking back to the few empty shops we see in the town at the moment, there does seem to be a growing trend nationwide for these temporary pop-up shops. Can you tell us how they operate?
Yes, well, they really came into their own during the recession, when obviously you had empty shops. Under the current legislation, if the shop is empty, the landlord is responsible for paying the business rates. But if he can have a tenant, in inverted commas, sort of in the premises, then he doesn't have to pay the rates, and it'll help his insurance as well, because if the property's empty, insurance premium goes up. If it's occupied, it will be lower. So that's where the pop-up shop came into being, really. And the one or two of them were actual charity pop-up shops, but also they're very popular around Christmas time as well. There's an empty shop, they will come along and trade from it. But yes, that's how they came about. I think we're beginning to see them sort of dwindle a little bit into the past now that we're hopefully through the recession.
Yeah, I'm aware of some shops in the town which seem to have been empty for a year or more, and in some of the local villages surrounding East Grinstead. And from what you've explained, these short-term pop-up shops could benefit both the person who wants to sell something and also the landlord or owner. So do you know why more commercial agents don't suggest this idea to landlords or owners?
I think to some extent you have to be a little bit careful with them, because there has been you could be saying it's just happening because the landlord does want to pay the rates on it. So you have to be a little bit careful there. But I think also pop-up shops, they won't go everywhere. They need to be, if it's going to be, they want to be in the town centre probably.
Oh, yes.
Forest Row might well be okay, although Forest Row has actually done pretty well during the last few years. But yes, they usually want to be in the High Street or the London Road. They won't want to be out in, perhaps in a village with nothing against the village, but they might have one or two shops. It really wouldn't be viable really for them. No.
So Christmas, I think
Christmas is the best time.
Is the best time for them. Yes.
And they'll usually come along and open about sort of October, and run through probably until early January.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And thinking now about commercial premises, both offices and light industry in this area, what types of companies and industries are there in and around East Grinstead nowadays?
Well, we haven't got quite what we used to have in the town. The two main industrial areas, of course, are where we are in Charlworth Road, and of course the Birches Industrial Estate down at off Imberhorn Lane.
Yeah.
There is a smaller one in Imberhorn Lane as well. In fact, the Birches Industrial Estate, if I'm correct, I think there isn't any vacant units down there at the moment, which is actually good. We have a vacant unit in Charlworth Road, but we have interest in it. So from an industrial point of view, the town does quite well. We haven't got, if we look at offices for the moment, the larger office space, 2,000 to 4,000 square feet, is extremely difficult to let at the moment. It's always been a little bit of a case with East Grinstead, is the difficulty in getting in and out of the town in the morning and in the evening. We've had talks of bypasses for many years, but that's probably never likely to happen. The topography of the land is such that the cost of doing it would be enormous. So, and unfortunately with offices, I mean, we've lost sort of Rentokil. They're not in the town now, or they're about. Yes, they are. I don't think they're in the town now. And Bowater Scott, where they used to be in East Grinstead House, they're no longer there now. We're fortunate in having the Caravan Club, which is a good supporter of the town. And there are other businesses in the town, but the larger companies, we don't seem to attract.
No.
I think to some extent with Gatwick and Crawley close by, it's difficult, but road connections are the main feature, and businesses look at how quickly their staff can get to them and get home again afterwards. And we all know that driving up the A22 from Felbridge in the morning and going out at night is not the best, really.
No, it's a bit of a nightmare.
Bit of a nightmare.
Phil, just to kind of quiz you a little bit more on that, do you think then the main reason is the infrastructure, the road infrastructure?
I think it is to some extent one of the biggest problems. Really, is because companies have to look at getting the staff in and getting out again in the evening, and I think that is one of the problems.
Even though they could get the rents far cheaper than what they would pay at Gatwick.
Yes.
You think they still take the
I think that's one of the questions.
Of the staffs?
Oh yes, I think so. Yes, I mean rents in East Grinstead are probably a little bit less than they are in Crawley and Gatwick, probably commensurate with those that you'd be paying in Horsham, for instance. But yes, I think the infrastructure is one of the problems. I know they have improved it but if you're coming in from Fellbridge, you've got 1, 2, and I don't know how many traffic lights you've got to go through. So that is one of the biggest problems, really. We've always found that when we're trying to let or to sell anything is access into the town, really, which is a shame. But I don't think you can make improvements to it, but I don't think you can do very much other than a bypass, which I don't think will ever happen, to be honest.
Thank you, Phil. We'll take a music break now.
No problems, and we might put that question forward to Rex Whittaker, leader of the council, who's coming in next Saturday, and say, whether we can push that forward and see whether we can get the infrastructure going at least.
Well, we'll see what Rex has got to say.
Absolutely. Thank you, Phil. Broken Heels, Alexander Burke, and we'll be back talking to Phil Baker again.
Your radio station for Crawley Down and Fellbridge. It's got to be your station, Meridian FM.
Welcome back. You're listening to Rotary on the Radio. I'm Leslie Robinson, and I'm talking to Phil Baker, who runs Park and Bailey Commercial in East Grinstead, which is an agency specialising in commercial property sales and letting. So we were talking, Phil, about the businesses in the town. What about the number of businesses? I mean, over the years, say, if we look over the last 10 years, has the number of businesses stayed fairly constant or gone up or down?
I would say it's probably gone down slightly. We were talking earlier about offices and the companies which were now no longer with us, and such as Rentokil, for instance. And of course, we've had Rydens, which was in offices in Cantaloupe Road, who've now moved back to closer to their other office in Forest Row.
Yes.
So I think from an office perspective, we're probably now lower in occupancy than we were. From a shop point of view, we're probably much the same, although the types of businesses have changed.
Yes.
We haven't got the shops that we had probably 10, 15 years ago. We haven't got those now. I mean, you take the old sweet shop in the High Street, had been there for nearly 100 years, yes. Wickendon's. I mean, when you lose something like that, you've lost it. You're never going to get something like that back again. But I think in general, with regard to shops, we're probably much the same. But I think one of the biggest problems with East Grinstead, and it's probably not just East Grinstead, but East Grinstead has evolved as a town, and the shops, in a lot of cases, they were either built back in the 50s and 60s or 70s. Some were created out of residences, houses, and if you want to try and attract the major retailer, the shops will not be right for them. They won't have rear loading and all that sort of thing. And so it's extremely difficult to attract the multiple retailer to a town if it doesn't have the right shop in the right configuration for it. I know Mr. and Mrs. Martell have been trying for years to do redevelopment of Queen's Walk, which I think would be very good for the town. And I think, that way you can perhaps attract the larger retailer, yes, because you're going to build a shop that would be suitable for that type of trader. So in the other parts of East Grinstead, you are going to get the sole trader in the main, because I think that's the way the things are going, really. And if you've got so many people now buying on the internet, that means that if you've got a shop, you've actually got to be in tune with that and make sure that if they are buying on the internet, they're buying from you on the internet, really. Yeah, yeah. So the shop is really your face to the world, but you're actually doing a lot of business, on the internet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you mentioned rear loading problems, and I mean we've already experienced the jams in London Road.
Yes.
When lorries are delivering to shops.
That's right. That is one of the biggest problems. And in some cases, in some towns, of course, they limit that. You've got to deliver between 8 and 9 in the morning, or between 5 and 6 in the evening. We don't do that in East Grinstead, but it can be a problem if you've got a shop that's parked outside one of the shops, loading or unloading. It causes a problem with traffic. Yeah. I think on the whole, you have to accept that East Grinstead was a market town, has evolved over the years, and wasn't built as a modern town with all the modern facilities. And I think that's part of East Grinstead's character, really. It's it is the old world high street, draws a lot of people. It's very attractive. It was an old market town, and I think that's one of its attractions, really. And if you try and change it too much, you'll lose its character. But I think in the area of Queen's Walk and that sort of area, that's where you would attract your major multiple retailer, really.
So there's some questions there, more questions, I think, for Rex Whittaker, perhaps.
Yes, certainly.
Next week.
Yeah. I'll have to ring him and tell him.
Yes.
I mean, lending has become much tighter. So, do you think that's had any effect? Have you seen a decrease in demand generally for premises? Or?
I think, it certainly has an impact because if you're starting a business today, or even if you're running a business today, which I'm not talking just retail, but you may have a business which requires offices, etc. Yes, lending organisations, banks, etc. do want a lot more information now to if they're going to fund a business. And that's where you've got to come into your due diligence. You've got to go into it in great detail and make sure that what you're planning to do will, in all probability, work. Yes, there is an element of guesstimate because you can't determine how many people are likely to come in and shop with you, or if you're running a business with offices, how much business you're going to do. But yes, it is more difficult. And therefore, if anybody's looking to rent a shop or offices for their business, and because they're expanding, they will need to go into great detail if they need funding to do that. Yes.
Yeah.
But have you seen a decrease from your point of view of people asking for shops or offices?
Well, we have. I mean, yes, through the recession, of course, those recessionary years, the number of people looking for shops fell quite considerably. It is beginning to show an improvement now, because I think confidence is beginning to return. It will take some time before we get back to pre-2007, for instance. Yes, I think we are beginning to see an improvement. Yes, but it is, as I say, if you're looking to run a business, open a business, start a business, and you want funding for it, you will need to go into great detail on what your projections and things are.
So we've all seen that some of the former offices in the town, the office blocks, have been converted into residential units, and you did mention earlier that office space, there are difficulties in letting certain sizes of office space, but is there still a demand for, say, smaller offices and light industrial premises?
Yes, I think there is, actually. I think if you've got office space, probably anything from 500 square feet up to 2,000 square feet, which will obviously include certain smaller businesses and slightly larger businesses. Yes, there is a demand there, and beginning to show an improvement with shops as well. But larger space is more difficult to let, especially offices. And of course, the recent government legislation came in which allowed you to convert offices into flats, as long as you don't alter the actual facade of the building. I can see that we may well have a situation in a few years' time when the local authority might wake up and realise that we've got no offices now because they've allowed most of them to be converted into flats. But that's perhaps being a little facetious, really.
And I think the problem with some of these conversions is that there isn't much parking for residents. There was, I believe, parking in, owning a car in the town centre is really, and parking it in the town centre is discouraged.
Yes, with regard, in some of the cases where they're converting office blocks into flats, there will be a certain amount of parking with the office block. Yeah. But where you've got other conversions or even new builds, parking isn't actually a major requirement these days. Local authority planning looks at usually you have to provide a bicycle store or something like that, because they take the view you're living in the middle of the town, so you don't need a car, which is perhaps a little bit short-sighted, really, because most people will have a car, and I think that's one of the problems we will have, is that you've got a lot of properties. And where do you put the car, for instance?
Yes, because they may be commuting. They may live in the centre of East Grinstead, but actually commute to Crawley or Tunbridge Wells or something.
Well, that's right, yes. I mean, as we know, a lot of people do commute from East Grinstead, and they tend to park in residential roads all around the town to avoid paying the parking fee. No, but that's happened for years, and it's you have to bear in mind that East Grinstead is the beginning of the line into London, and naturally you're going to have a lot of people going up to town or to Croydon to work. I think it was a shame, and we were. I don't think when they closed all the railway lines back in the 60s, they didn't think far enough ahead, because if we had a connection now between East Grinstead and Crawley on a rail link, it would make a heck of a lot of difference. A major difference, really. But then Mr. Beeching couldn't see that far ahead, really.
Phil, just also while we got you in the studio, what are the typical square footage charged these days in East Grinstead? Is it vary from commercial to shops, office, or is it?
Yeah, it does vary, of course. With offices,
so if I'm looking to open a business, how much do I need to kind of think? Okay, this is how a square footage is going to cost me.
Yeah. Well, with offices, it depends on the building, whether it's a modern or whether it's an older building. I suppose. In reality, you're probably anywhere between £8 a square foot and £12 a square foot for offices. And if it's really, really good, you might be paying a little bit more. But I would say between 8 and 12, and the norm is probably around 10, actually. With regard to shops, of course, that's a little bit more difficult, because when you're talking of shops, you actually talk of your Zone A area, which is your prime shopping spot.
Okay.
And then you've got the sort of Zone Bs, or your prime or your subprime areas. So as far as East Grinstead is concerned, our prime area for shops and rents is from the traffic lights in the centre of the town, where Robert Dyers and Superdrug are, up the London Road to the roundabout at the top with the High Street. That's your prime pitch. And you're probably, we've seen rents fall quite considerably there, but you're probably around there's Zone A, which, when I talk of Zone A, you're looking at a shop, and Zone A is the first 20 feet back from the front of the shop. That's the most expensive part of the shop.
I was just going to ask you to explain to the listeners what Zone A is.
Zone A, that's the most expensive part. That's when the people walk in. So you have the first 20 feet, and then the next 20 feet is not so expensive, and so on. Zone A rents in East Grinstead probably are now about £50 a square foot. Wow. Say 50 to £55 a square foot. Whereas pre-recession they had got up to £70 a square foot. Zone A. Yeah. So that has been an impact on the rents.
So the closer to the walking pedestrian, the more you pay.
Yes, you're paying. Your rent will be higher in the prime pitch of any town.
I suppose it makes sense. The further away you are,
and then you get the other side of, say, Robert Dyas and Superdrug moving up the London Road towards Railway Approach. Then rents will get a little bit less as you get further away from the prime pitch, and the same applies to the high street really as well. So yes, that's how it works. Some of the shops, of course, in the town, they're owned by pension funds. And of course, they don't like to see rents falling because that affects the overall value of the fund. But unfortunately, reality.
I was going to say they have to move with the times, don't they?
Well, exactly. Yes. So yes, I would say we've since having gone through that recessionary period, which they say is probably the deepest we've been since the 1930s. Yes, it's had a prime effect on rents. And that's not just East Grinstead, that's pretty general, really.
Just one more question before we take another break, Phil. The question of whether there will be a second runway at Gatwick is being discussed now, and people are kind of speculating, perhaps. Do you foresee any increase in demand for commercial premises, kind of in advance, from people hoping that they'll get in now on the ground, more cheaply, or do you think most people will it's too far away to influence their thinking?
I think probably it's a little too far away at the moment. There will be those that will say, we don't want another runway at Gatwick.
Yeah.
I think my personal view is that we know the airport's there.
Yes.
Yes, an extra runway will increase air traffic, obviously, but I think the benefits to the area in general from employment and that sort of thing will be very good. And I don't mean just Crawley, for example, or Hawley, because I think the spin-offs will be in East Grinstead as well. So, and I think a lot of us use Gatwick anyway if we're going away, but I think in general, if you look at the options, between sort of Gatwick and Heathrow in particular, they seem to have sort of ruled out Stansted, whereas you could quite easily, I think, expand Stansted as well. But my feeling is, rather than build a new airport somewhere else, why not use the facilities you've already got? You know where the airports are, and I think that the area would benefit by having another runway at Gatwick. I know a lot of people wouldn't agree with me there, but I think from a business point of view, and from the sort of towns in general, it would be good.
Yes.
But let me ask you this then, Phil. Should Gatwick get the runway, say it's approved, they have it, will East Grinstead benefit, in your opinion?
I think it will benefit, yes, because I think an extra runway will attract extra business. More firms will want to come within the area, and then you find they start coming out. So they will initially look at Hawley or Crawley, in that sort of area, and then they'll move out towards Horsham and East Grinstead, or even to Reigate and Red Hill for that matter. But they will, yes, I'm sure it will bring in more business.
So that'll be good for,
I think it would be good, yes,
customers, which are landlords and owners, and local employment.
Yes, local employment I think would benefit. I think it could attract more businesses to come to towns like East Grinstead, which is good. I know in a lot of cases they will bring employees with them, but that will also create jobs for people in the area as well. And I think you have to think of the younger people in the area, East Grinstead and Crawley, etc., who are starting out on their careers, and the more opportunity they've got, I think is what we should be looking at, really.
Yeah.
And I think that's...
Listen, I have no problems with that personally. When I bought the house, I knew where I was buying my house.
Yes.
It's not like the airport suddenly came in.
No.
So, and if it's going to bring jobs, it's going to create employment, it's going to create wealth.
Yes.
Not only that, I use the airport to travel.
I do as well, yes.
I have no voice to say don't. I'll only be able to do that if I don't go on holidays. Unfortunately, I do.
Yes.
So I can't have it both ways.
Well, no, I agree with you there. I'll tell you a little story, because way back in my career I dealt with residential property, and we had a property in Reed Hall Road, Smallfield, which actually, when you were in the front bedroom, it was right in line of the flight path. You could see the pilot. You could see the pilot. You thought he was actually going to land it in your bedroom. And I thought to myself, we'll never sell this. It's just impossible. In fact, we sold it within 10 days, and the person was quite happy.
That's because they had a great selling agent.
Well, not necessarily. I think he must have been an aviation enthusiast, I think. But, so it doesn't follow, actually. And I think it's like anything else with aircraft or airports or railways or anything else. They're there, so if you don't want to live next door to one, you go do the opposite, don't you, really?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Phil. We'll take another break now and come back to chat some more with you after the music.
Baby, I Love Your Way. You're listening to 107 Meridian FM. This is Rotary on the Radio show. Thank you for your tweets, and thank you, Richard, for your phone call saying we have an interesting guest in the studio. So keep listening. Any calls, any questions, please call us 01342 325 222 or email info@meridianrotary.co.uk. Leslie.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, I'm talking with Phil Baker about commercial property in East Grinstead. Now, Phil, what about the timescales? If from the owner, the landlord, and the tenant's point of view, how long does it take you? I mean, is there to go through all the processes in leasing or properties? Is there a ballpark figure, or is it as long as a piece of string?
Well, from Phil's point of view, the quicker the better.
Quicker the better.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but no, it's. I suppose if you're buying a commercial property, it obviously depends how you're financing it. But in general, it should go through within 6 to 8 weeks.
Oh, that's pretty short.
I say should.
Yes.
There are occasions where other things come into play, and it'll go on for a bit longer. Leasing is much the same, though the references, taking up references and that sort of thing will take a little time at the beginning. So it will take a lease normally to go through again about 6 to 8 weeks, or it should do. I have in some cases where you've sold something and it's taken probably 4 months or more to go through, and the same with leasing property. The days of 2 or 3 page leases have gone now, and most standard leases are probably 40 pages or more, and so it does obviously take a little bit longer to go through and advise would-be tenants and purchasers on contracts and leases and so forth. But in general, yes, although I have had sales which have gone on and taken years to go through for various reasons.
Really?
Yeah. Yes, and again, if you're buying something where planning is involved, then of course it can take much longer, because it's got to go through the planning process, and it depends on what it is, what's being built, etc. But yes, it could take 6 months or more to go through planning. But if it's a fairly straightforward sale or letting, as I say, 6 to 8 weeks should see it through, yes.
Yeah. So 2 questions quickly then, Phil. Sales, what's the quickest you've done?
Quickest I've done is 2 weeks.
Longest?
Longest sale, I'll tell you, 8 years.
Wow.
8 years?
8 years. And it's... but that was certainly complicated, planning was involved, and that is
a complex
transaction. It was organisations being involved as well, and then we had the Ashdown Forest planning issue, which delayed things as well. So yes, that is a bit unusual.
No, that's not.
But I have had one where planning is involved, and it can take up to 2 years or more for them to go through. But that's a bit unusual.
And on lettings, quickest?
Quickest letting, a week.
Longest?
Longest, gosh, what do I remember the longest? I think that took 4 months, to actually go through.
1 week, that's pretty...
1 week. Well, they had everything ready.
That's the kind of tenant you want to come into your office.
The landlord and his solicitor met with the tenant and his solicitor and they basically worked it all out. They got the basic principle done in a meeting, and then the two solicitors took just 5 days or so just to knock it into shape, and they signed it, and that was it.
They were happy, your landlord was happy, you got the cheque, and
that's right. Everybody was happy, basically. Yes. Yeah.
So we'll come back to you a little later if we can, Phil, because we're going to be coming up fairly shortly to the news and the weather, so we'll have a little bit of music.
We haven't got time for a music, Leslie, because I think we've just got just over a minute away. But perhaps we'll give Phil a break, and perhaps we can let the listeners know of a couple of the local events, and then we'll go over to our news studio. Yeah. You're listening to Rotary on the Radio on 107 Meridian FM. And Leslie, over to you.
Thank you. I'm talking to Phil Baker, who runs Park and Bailey Commercial, a commercial property agency in the town. And Phil, I was doing a bit of research before you came in, and I see that the Town Council has published a vision for the town to 2026. Their vision includes having a town that's sustainable, with a vibrant local economy, high quality facilities, welcoming place to live, work and visit. And their policies include delivering more local jobs, regenerating the town centre, less traffic congestion, more affordable housing and necessary infrastructure improvements. So what are your views on the town plan?
Well, basically, I think the Town Council's vision is very good. I mean, no town can stand still, otherwise it will deteriorate, basically. And I think that their vision to maintain the distinctive character of East Grinstead, which I think is one of its attractions, to be perfectly honest, is very good. And to retain its identity, it can be, if you're not careful, it can be changed and look like any other town for that matter. Yes. But no, I think that is good. And I think also you need to attract business to the town, because that increases jobs, which in turn means that more people will be coming to the town. And I think also it's very important to have housing for young people. I think that is important. They are the future of your town.
Definitely.
You've got to provide for the younger person, because they are the ones that are going to hopefully live in the town. You'll have children that will grow up in the town. That is why you need your schools, etc. And I think that in turn it generates the town. You need that. And I know there are people who would like to see the town stay exactly as it is, but if it did stay exactly as it is, it would deteriorate.
Yes, it would die.
And I think as long as it's carefully planned and looked at in some detail, so you have an overall plan for development, yes, it will mean new housing and new building, but that's what you need. If you're going to encourage people to come and live in the town, have their children grow up in the town, work in the town, or that sort of thing, you do need to have that vision to maintain but improve what you've already got. And I think their vision is excellent for the town.
The vision is excellent, but what about the timing? 2026.
Well, you have to say with local authority, whether it's the town council, parish council, or the district councils, there is a certain amount of legislation, etc., to go through, and we all know that never happens very quickly. But you do actually have to put a time scale on it, and they're looking at sort of over the next 12 years, aren't they, really?
And what I'm trying to say is, are we going to be missing the boat by 2026, where other towns have acted quickly?
Well, I think there is always there was that danger. If you take too long, you'll be overtaken by somebody else. And we touched on earlier.
Then it comes back full circle.
It does. It does indeed, and as I say, we touched on earlier about the expansion of Gatwick, which I think would be have a bearing on the town as well, create more jobs, etc. But I think you can't stand still today. You actually have to look forward. I think 2026 is. I would like to see it sooner.
How sooner?
I think you should be looking in the next 10 years rather than...
You're a man after my own heart there,
yeah,
Phil.
I think it's
we
too
have
long
to bring that forward. Absolutely,
yeah,
totally agree.
It takes too long for these things to happen, basically.
So, Phil, if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about East Grinstead, what do you think that might be?
Apart from having more clients coming through to you.
Yeah, quite.
Just in case you said that.
What would I do to change...
one thing. Just one thing.
One thing. I think if I had to do one thing which would, I think, have a bearing on East Grinstead and its businesses, abolish parking charges.
Really?
Yeah. I think that I hear it so often. Somebody's in a shop looking at something and thinks, I've only got 2 minutes before my parking ticket runs out, and they go. And that means that the retailer has lost a sale.
Yeah.
And I think that whilst I appreciate that the local authorities obviously has to pay for car parks and that sort of thing, but I don't think it's encouraging for people to actually shop in the town if they've got to pay. You can go down to Uckfield and park for free, or you can park for free in Forest Row. So, I think that's a bit of a discouragement for people to shop in the town, basically.
And in your opinion, again, Phil, do you think that'll attract people going to these mass industrial shopping complexes, and instead of that, they'll come to the town or stay in town with their shopping habits?
I think if they didn't have to pay, they probably would stay in the town and they walk around the town and do. I think we have to accept that our shopping habits have changed, and that we intend to try and go to somewhere where we can do everything in one hit and then go home, such as your big shopping centres, etc., which is why they've grown up. And I think also this is one of the reasons why you've got your supermarket, because you can get all your groceries, etc., fruit and vegetables and meats and fish and all that sort of thing in one place. Yeah, exactly. So our shopping habits have changed and are changing.
But parking will help.
But I think if you didn't have parking charges, I think it would help. Yes.
Yeah,
that's a great thing to change.
Definitely. I suspect that all our listeners, unless they're profiting from the parking charges, will be overwhelmingly in favour of that suggestion.
Not only that, I think all our listeners will be saying, Phil for the next council leader.
I don't think so. Thank you.
So, Phil, finally, is there anything else you'd like to tell listeners about running a business in East Grinstead?
Well, I think first of all, we talked earlier about doing one thing, and parking was one. I think if I had a magic wand and I could wave, I think pedestrianisation of the Old World High Street would be good. Difficult because you've got to have the service roads for the shops, but I think that would be very good. Running a business in East Grinstead, well, I've been in East Grinstead now since 1970, so I think I probably know a good bit about East Grinstead. But running a business like mine is like anybody else running a business. It has to make a profit. You have to obviously. It's slightly different in an agency such as ours, in that we have to wait for a sale or a letting to complete, which can be 6 to 8 weeks or even longer away before we get paid. So cash flow can be a bit tricky at times. But in general, I sort of dropped into property, really. I qualified in 1976, I think it was, and I like doing what I do. I've met a lot of people in the years I've been here. I hope they've liked me as well. But yes, running a business is like anything else. It has to make a profit, or at least it has to break even. I felt when we sold Underwood Payne & Co to Park and Bailey back in 2001, which is when I set up Park and Bailey Commercial, there wasn't a commercial agent in East Grinstead, and I felt that was an opportunity. Much as I know most of the other commercial agents in Crawley and Tunbridge Wells and Horsham around, and so it's proved. I just like to thank the town, really, in a way, because they've provided me my income and my employment and enjoyment, really, over all those years. And I think it's. Some say, why don't I retire now? And I say, well, I like doing it at the moment, but won't go on doing it forever, obviously.
But there's no better reason for working, is there, than enjoying what you do, Phil?
I enjoy what I do. It's it gives me a reason to get up in the morning, and I've made a lot of friends during that time as well.
Yes, and you're very involved in the town, and you know a lot about the town. So
I think so. Yeah. Well,
yes.
I've got to know it over the years, obviously.
Yes.
Yes, I do, and I value the friendships and acquaintances I've made during that time. Really.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Phil. Please don't run away yet. We're going to have a break now, but we're going to have a chat about another side of Phil's life after the break.
Welcome back. You're listening to Rotary on the Radio on 107 Meridian FM. If just a quick update to listeners, if anyone is listening and know the score for East Grinstead Rugby that's currently going on in Guernsey, can you please tweet or email us and update me, so one, I know, and two, I can let anyone else who's got no access to internet at the moment know what's going on there. Leslie, I think we're back with Phil, but we're talking about a completely
different topic. Yes. So I'm not sure. I don't think we mentioned this, Phil, when we welcomed you to the programme, but you are actually a member of our Meridian Rotary Club. So we'd like to chat with you for a few minutes now about the club and your role in it. You've been club president twice during the years.
Yes, that's right.
And you were awarded a prestigious Rotary Award, a Paul Harris Fellowship, for your work in Rotary. So can you tell us, when did you decide to join Rotary, and what attracted you?
Well, as you may know, I was one of the founding members of the Meridian Rotary Club, and I was approached to join the club as it was being formed. And although I didn't live in East Grinstead, I worked in East Grinstead, and my living in East Grinstead, and I thought it was a way I could give something back to the town through the Rotary Club. And so I was, that's why I joined and was one of the founding members of East Grinstead Meridian Rotary Club. And I have to say that in all the years since then, I've made some excellent friends and acquaintances during that time, and people I would not have met if I hadn't have joined the Rotary Club. So, yes, I think it's an exceptionally worthwhile cause, really. We've done some amazing things over the years. I can remember one of the first, some of the listeners may not remember, but when they electrified the line down to East Grinstead Meridian Rotary Club was one of the first. We hired a train and ran it from East Grinstead down to Bournemouth.
Wow.
And back. That was the first electric train out of East Grinstead.
Oh,
and
a whole train?
A whole
Not
train.
Just a carriage?
Yeah,
no.
we were assisted by the Rotary Club of Titsey.
Yes.
And the two of us. And, we hired the train, sold the tickets, filled the train. The train was actually filled to the gunnels. And it went from East Grinstead all the way down to Bournemouth and back.
Fantastic.
And we served coffees and teas and things on the train.
Yes.
And I don't think the members that were on it at the time will ever forget it, because I think we were absolutely shattered by the time we got back.
You were.
But
it was great fun. It was great fun. Great fun.
Yes.
We tried to get into the Guinness Book of Records, I think, for the fastest moving and the bingo in the country or something. I think we didn't quite make it, but it was a good bit of fun when we were calling out the numbers, and we had people standing at each carriage relaying the numbers down through the train. It was silly things we did, but it was good fun. Good fun, and I think everybody who went on it enjoyed it as well.
Yeah. Now, are there any particular club projects or events? I mean, you mentioned this train journey, but anything else? I mean, we talked earlier this morning with Roger about the golf days, but was there anything that you've personally been involved in which you're particularly proud of? Yeah.
Well, there was the train, wasn't there? Gosh, I think one of the things was that when we hadn't been going very long, when the Rotary Polio Plus campaign started, and I think I was the second president of the club at the time, and we had started having sort of annual balls. We held them at the Effingham Park Hotel, and well, John Jones was the founder president, and he started it going, and we used the ball really to start raising funds for Polio Plus. And as we all know, that still carries on, although we haven't quite eradicated it from the world, but we're pretty close to doing so. And I think that was one of the major things. But of course, we've done a number of things over the years. The golf day, which we were talking about earlier, that's been run for 16 years or 15 years. I think it is 16 years next year, isn't it? Yeah. And we've had race nights, and we've had auctions of promises and things like that, which have been great fun. And I think all the members have enjoyed it, and even everybody who's come along has enjoyed it as well. I was just trying to think of what else. We've done so many things over the years that.
Yes, well, I mean, on a regular basis we have our Christmas collection.
Oh, the Christmas, yes, you're very true.
We collect the money, and it goes to the local needy and elderly people in the town. And, that's quite a big operation.
It's quite a lot. It's quite logistically. It's quite difficult to put on.
Yes.
And sometimes when you're out and it's teeming down with rain, and you think, why am I doing this? And then you knock at a door, and Mum comes with a little one, and his eyes light up when they see Father Christmas and the Christmas tree. That's why we do it, basically. Yes, it's raising funds for the needy and elderly, etc., in the area, in the town. So it's. Yeah,
and of course the motto of Rotary is service above self.
Absolutely.
And all the members give an enormous amount of their own time, and their families are quite often involved as well.
Yes, we all get involved in I mean, our wives are involved with it as well, and yes, it's been. I wouldn't have changed it. I think as I say, we've made a lot of friends through Rotary, and if anybody doesn't know what Rotary is about, they ought really to come along and see what it's about, because it's a worthwhile. But we have fun doing it, really. Yeah, and that's what it's about.
Yeah, I believe we've been going East Grinstead Meridian Rotary for 28 years.
Gosh, is that how long?
I think it's 28 years. Yes. Have you seen any changes in the club? I mean, do you think we move with the times?
I think. You say 28 years. You say, Leslie. Goodness me. That makes me feel old now.
That's an interesting question to Phil, because Phil was talking about the town and how the businesses and everything else should move with time. So do you think, as a club,
I think East Grinstead Meridian has. I say regretfully, I think there are some Rotary clubs out there that haven't, and are finding that they're not getting new members, etc. I think, yes, East Grinstead Meridian did. I mean, initially I think we were all male, but fairly early on we decided that we would be a dual gender, and we would have males as well as females into the club, and I think that was a good thing. And we've got some very good people in our club now, and You've been a member for Leslie for some time as well, haven't you?
Yes. I transferred from another club to Meridian about 12 years ago.
Yes. I think they weren't quite. They didn't want to get rid of you, did they?
No.
But we were quite glad to have her, actually.
Thank you, Phil, for that. Now, we know that some of our listeners are very interested in Rotary and might be thinking of joining, but they obviously, especially the younger people, have a lot of commitments. So, but when you first joined, you were working full-time and you had a fairly young family, didn't you? So how difficult did you find it to juggle all the different commitments?
Well, it is sometimes difficult. I think you do actually have to make priorities, and I always said to myself that it would be the family, the business and Rotary in that order.
Yeah.
But in fact, although the children were quite young at the time I joined Rotary, they actually met friends, children of other members, and have made friendships that way. And in fact, although I started out in that way, it doesn't really. You adapt accordingly, and I appreciate it is difficult if you're working in town and you've got to train up to London and back.
Yes.
And originally, when I started in Rotary, there was an attendance rule, which has been dropped now, because one appreciates that not always can everybody get to a meeting every week. But that doesn't mean to say they're not good Rotarians. And we have people that who aren't in the club but join with us in our things we do, like the golf days and so forth, who are, we call them friends of Rotary. So yes, I think I've had good fun out of it, and I'd like to think that we've done a bit of good in that time, really.
Yeah. So if you were talking to a listener about Rotary, and what would you say it offers to people?
I think it basically, well, first and foremost, the motto is service above self. So basically the idea is that you can give something back to the community or to the wider world by your efforts in Rotary. But I've also, as I said earlier, it enabled me to create new friendships, and my children grew up knowing other members' children and became friends, and we've had friends there. I mean, close friends I've made through Rotary, plus other friends as well, which we've known. Yeah, I think it is there to help the local community in any way we can, and also the wider world through Polio Plus and things like sand dams in Africa, which trying to give clean water and that sort of thing. I don't want any accolades or anything like that. I just think it's something we're giving back to the community and the wider world, really.
And we do have great fun as well, don't we? There's a lot of laughter and there's social activities. And
you're quite right.
In fact, I think sometimes our weekly meetings can be quite loud with, you listen and there's this great buzz of conversation. Yes,
I think that's true. We're not too formal, and I think the conversation and the comradeship and that sort of thing is good, and that's what Rotary is about. And we've fortunately over the years been able to gain new members to where we've lost members through moving away and so forth, and gain new members who've been also great credit to the club, and I think that's how the club will continue. We need new members. It won't, if you don't get new blood into any organisation, it will tend to stagnate, and I think that is good. So if anybody is interested in Rotary, I would suggest they make contact and come along and see what we do. Come and meet us, basically.
Yeah. I'll tell you what's refreshing, talking about conversations and everything else. It's nice to see all different age groups sitting in separate groups or whatever you want to call it, to sections of the table, and having a conversation. It's not like the old in one side and the young in the other.
No.
That, for me, was quite refreshing.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think we've always tried...
Everyone's involved.
We try to involve everyone. And if everyone, the idea is that you don't come and sit with the friend.
That's what I'm trying to get.
Week after week after week. No, not at all.
No clicky, nothing.
No, nothing like that at all.
Very refreshing.
Yeah, you've got to come along and everybody meets up, so you can be sitting with somebody different every week, and that's what it's about, basically.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Phil. You've given up a lot of your time today, and you have missed the cycle race, which has gone through your home village, I believe. So
yes, that's right.
Well, you've missed that, so you'll have to ask Shirley, your wife, to tell you about it. But so thank you very much indeed
for
coming
pleasure.
in to talk with us.
Pleasure.
And if any listeners are interested in finding out more about East Grinstead Meridian Rotary, please look at our website, which is meridianrotary.co.uk. And if you're interested in coming along to one of our meetings, you can contact us at info@meridianrotary.co.uk, or you can tweet us at Meridian Rotary. We do meet every Wednesday, mostly at the Dorset Arms in the High Street, East Grinstead, at 7:30 p.m. But please do contact us before turning up at a meeting, as sometimes we are out and about enjoying ourselves.
And just before we let you go, Phil, I know we've thanked you, but
that's all right.
Is there a website that, should someone be interested in either letting or selling their premises, can contact you?
Yes, there is a Park and Bailey commercial website.
What's the do you know top of your head? If not, don't worry, we'll put it out. And is there a contact number that you would like to give?
Our contact number is 01342 321 272.
Brilliant, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Meridian FM is proudly sponsored by the Cox Management Services Group. Part of the Cox Management Services Group.
Your radio for East Grinstead and beyond. For East Grinstead and beyond, it's Meridian FM.
It's Rex Whittaker, leader of East Grinstead Town Council. So do tune in to listen to us at 12 noon. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.